Hello everybody, my name is Julie Bueno, and in this opportunity I want to talk to you about IELTS Writing task number 1 from the academic module. So I want to tell you how to do it. I'm gonna give you some tips and what to consider when writing your task number 1. Let's start. So to do this, first I want to mention some generalities. When we are writing task number 1, we need to keep in mind that it has to be done in 20 minutes and you need to write at least 150 words. The objective of the task is to describe and summarize some graphic information which can be given to you through any visual representation like a diagram, a chart, a bar graph, line graph, or any other. How are we gonna do this? So, I want you to follow a 4-paragraph approach. We're gonna start with the first paragraph, that is paraphrasing the prompt. What's the prompt? It's basically the instruction that you are given in the exam. So you need to consider what words you can paraphrase using synonyms. Of course, there are some words that you can change, so you just need to leave them the same. Like for example, the names of countries or years, you can paraphrase that information. After doing this, we're going to write an overview. What's an overview? Basically, it's a short paragraph in which you are going to describe relevant and main trends from the graph. Here, it's important that you please do not include numbers or figures. Here, you are just mentioning relevant information without numbers. Then, we're gonna write paragraph number 3 and paragraph number 4. So for this part, it's really important that you divide the information into 2 parts. For example, you are given a graph about women and men. So you may decide to talk in one paragraph about men, and in the second one you can talk about women, right? Or maybe you may get a graph which is talking or is comparing higher education with secondary education, for instance. So in one paragraph you can talk about one aspect, and in the other one you talk about the second one. So that's something important for you to do before starting writing. You need to consider how you are going to divide the information. And so on paragraph number 3 and number 4, you're going to include numbers, percentages, fractions, and give all the details from the graph in 2 sections. After writing these 2 paragraphs, I want you to go over everything you wrote and make sure information is clear. Something important here, please do not write a conclusion. This task doesn't need a conclusion. So let me show you an example of how to do all these things I've just mentioned. So I want you to see this prompt. I'm gonna read it. It says, the chart below shows the number of men and women in further education in Britain in 3 periods and whether they were studying full-time or part-time. That's the prompt. This is the graph. We can take a look at the graph and we can see that in the graph the information is divided into male, female, we have full-time and we have part-time education. And we have 3 periods of time. Then the paraphrasing could be something like this. Here it says the chart, so in my paraphrasing I can say the bar graph. Then here it says shows, I can use illustrates. The number of men and women, I just change it by the number of males and females in further education, engaged in continuing education. In Britain, I can change the country. It shows whether they were studying full-time or part-time, and it's divided into 3 periods. I put this in parentheses because you can include it if you want. You can say from 1970 to 1990. Or if you just want to omit it, well, you leave it out. As you can see in this first paragraph, we are just paraphrasing the information that is given in the prompt, and we are using simple present, yeah, for the first part, like the bar graph illustrates. Then here, well, I also have it shows, for example. I'm basically using simple present in the first part. Keep in mind, you need to use synonyms. Then, we are going to go over a formula that I consider could help you paraphrase your prompt. So first, you identify the type of chart. Then you can use any of these verbs. You can mention the topic. and then if it's possible and if it is given in the prompt, you can mention the date. Between and from to over a year period. Here I want you to consider what I just mentioned before, the third person conjugation. If you have two pie charts, for instance, well, demonstrate. If you have one pie chart, then demonstrates. So keep in mind that for simple present when you're writing your paraphrasing. After this, we're going over the second paragraph. So here it's important that we take 1 minute to read the graph, to understand it. What's the graph telling us? And then we can notice those relevant trends that we need to mention in the second paragraph. How you're gonna do this? Remember, do not include numbers, and you can start with a connector, like for example, overall, the number of men and women studying part-time outnumber those studying full-time by a significant margin. So let's take a look at that. Part-time, it's the gray part, and full-time is the black part or the black graph. So we can say the number of men here and women studying part-time, the gray part, yes, outnumber, so was bigger than those studying full-time. Yeah, that's true. Then we have a second sentence, and it says, while both modes were relatively similar between the sexes, there was some variance, especially in the 1990s. Let's take a look at that. When the number of women studying part-time, here, part-time, increased substantially. Yeah, we can see it here. This is the highest point. So I'm mentioning here the most significant feature from the graph. And as you noticed, I didn't include numbers. When I'm saying numbers, I'm talking about percentages, not the years. Of course, I can include years here to show the trends. Again, I have a tip for you in this section. So as I was mentioning before, spend a minute understanding the graph. Make sure that you describe key features only and do not include numbers. Some useful language that you can use. You can start with a connector like in general, overall, as a general trend, and then you can use some of these expressions if you want, or just go straight to the point. Then we're gonna move to third paragraph. In this paragraph, as I was telling you, it's important that you divide the information into two parts. In this case, I'm going to show you an example with full-time education. Here we are going to include figures and numbers. So, and we need to give a lot of detail. So I'm going to start with a connector. It says, with regards to full-time education. So I'm telling my reader that I divided the information into full-time and part-time. Then, with regards to full-time education, male students approximately doubled from around 100,000 in 1970 to well over 200,000 by the end of 1991. So I'm describing in this part the male students, right? I'm saying, give me a second, I'm talking about full-time, this one. So I'm saying that here, from here to here, there was almost double number of students. Then for women, I'm going to talk about this part, women, the trajectory was less consistent, rising sharply in the first decade and then tapering off to an almost identical level to that of men in the 1990s. Yeah, so I said that here it went up, it was a dramatic, a sharp rise, and then in the last decade it had almost the same number than men. So in this paragraph you can see that I explained all the black, let's say, part of my graph. Now, same tips, some tips. Start with a connector, just as I did it, with regards to, you can use others, as can be seen in figure 1, in the case that you have two figures, according to, for example, full-time education. Turning to the first chart, if we had two charts, we can observe, etc., etc. Then it's important that you use superlatives. For example, the most popular activity, well, in this case, I think I don't have an example of superlatives or comparatives too. And remember to include figures and fractions. In this case, for example, you can use, if we have 26%, we can say roughly 1/4. It depends on the fraction, on the percentage we have. So I'm just gonna show you this. You can go to this page, IELTSBuddy.com, and there you can find like all this vocabulary, which can be useful for you to write your task. Okay, this is important, guys, because you are going to avoid having all the time the same structure, all the time using 77%, 20%, 50%. So instead of doing that, you can vary your language using qualifiers or using fractions. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth paragraph. So in the previous one, we talked about full-time education. So in this one, we're going to talk about part-time education, and we're gonna follow the same approach. You need to give key features, details, you need to include numbers, and mention everything that is in the chart. This is the example I'm gonna show to you. The number of males engaged in part-time study over the 3 periods fluctuated, dropping from around 1 million to 900,000 over the 3 periods. Meanwhile, the number of women studying part-time steadily increased from nearly 800,000 in 1970 to well above 1 million in 1990-91. So, well, if you want, just as I mentioned before, you can start with a connector for this fourth paragraph. You can say regarding part-time education. Something important here is that you do not repeat the same connector. If in paragraph number 3 you started with regarding something, in the fourth paragraph you are not going to start again with regarding. You need to vary your language. Okay? And same comment, use superlatives, use comparatives, figures, and fractions. Okay, so here I'm going to show you a sample prompt with a pie chart or 2 pie charts. So it says the pie graphs below show the results of a survey of children's activity. The first graph shows the cultural and leisure activities that boys participate in, whereas the second graph shows the activities in which the girls participate. So that's our prompt. This is the graph, and this is an example I took from IELTSapp.com, where you can see everything I've just said. So you have paraphrasing, you have an overview, details about the first chart, details about the second chart, right? And I am showing you in red all the connectors this person used, or the linking words, and in blue you can see the language related to qualifiers. In this case I have superlatives. I think there are some comparatives as well, percentages. So in that way you are varying your language. And the total number of words for this sample is 244 words. These are some of the writing band descriptors which you can Google, and you can find all the information about what you are evaluated on. Finally, I want to give you my final useful tips on this task, and it's first, make sure that you interpret the graph before writing. Sometimes people start writing and they don't even pay attention to what the task says or what the information is telling them. Make sure that you paraphrase the prompt, divide the information into paragraphs. It's important to have paragraphs. In this case, I'm asking you to have 4 paragraphs, please. And use a variety of sentences, use connectors. Well, in the case you are taking the exam and you are on the day of the exam, you need to do it in 20 minutes. Well, that's basically all I wanted to tell you, and I hope this video was useful for you. Thanks, bye.